Here's our video for the hymn Adoro Te Devote by St. Thomas Aquinas. The way this video is going to work, there are 7 verses. I'm going to play a recording of the verse with the text on the screen. And then I'll lead you through, sort of guide you through reading that verse. Then I'll play another verse, guide you through the next verse. We'll do that for all 7 verses. So let's begin with just the first verse here. Okay, so that first verse there, you can see it up in the music here. Adoro te devote latens deitas, quae subis figuris vere latitas, tibi se cor meum totum subjicit, quia te contemplans totum deficit. Just things, to bring up first. Deitas, divinity. Here, of course, meaning God. Not particular, not unusual poetically to refer to God as just the divinity. Certainly by the 1200s, that's fairly normal. When we get to, and then the quae, of course, feminine, because deitas is feminine. So Adoro Te Devote latens deitas quae sub is figuris vere latitas. And then is figuris, that's probably just worth bringing up now. This poem was written by Thomas Aquinas, most probably as a devotional poem for his own time spent before the Blessed Sacrament. And so whenever you see things that refer to like now or these or here or things like that, the context is always Mass or Eucharistic adoration or something like that. And so when he says under is figuris, he means bread and wine. He means the accidents, the matter of the Eucharist, things like that. And then moving on, tibi se cor meum totum subjicit. Worth noticing, cor meum is the subject here. Cor meum subjicit se, itself, totum. Totum this is common in Latin for an adjective to be used in the way that we would use an adverb. So, cor meum subjicit se totum, its whole self. In English, you would probably put it more better, itself entirely. That would be probably better English. Latin likes to use adjectives. It's actually fairly uncommon to use a bunch of adverbs, or at least derived adverbs in Latin. You're much more likely to use adjectives in that way. Quia te contemplans totum deficit. And so, here we've got a good rhyme between totum and totum. It's good to know that, especially in his poetry, Thomas Aquinas, very good writer, very clever, very beautiful writing. And so it's not often when we translate things, they get translated very simply. And so you don't see a lot of like super clever things going on in the translation. And I read somewhere even one time that was praising the Adoro Te Devote for its simplicity. There's no flourish, there's no cleverness to get in the way of pure, love for the Eucharist. And I was like, yeah, it's whatever, you just, you don't know Latin well enough, but there's a decent amount of cleverness in this poem and beauty, and it's not improper to show respect for the Eucharist with flourish and pomp and thing, majesty, and that's something the Roman Catholic Church has known for centuries, and has done a very good job of for centuries, to use majesty and things like that in the liturgy. Moving on, verse 2. All right, looking at that first line, visus, tactus, gustus, this is what we call asyndeton. Asyndeton just means you've listed a bunch of things and you haven't used the word and. It's just worth noting. Visus, tactus, gustus means visus, tactus, et gustus, and it's just, names of senses. Inte fallitur. Fallitur, singular, even though it's got multiple subjects in front of it, it's being used in the singular because of, it's taking it as though each one did this individually. Sed auditu solo tuto creditur. And here's a nice, again, here's some clarity. So creditur isn't really passive. It's an impersonal. So verbs that are basically intransitive, like credo, are, they don't really become passive in meaning. And what it means is when you take and put it in a passive form, it's sort of an impersonal. There is a believing. Not that it's not saying this is believed. It's like there is a believing. But of course, fallitur, creditur. It's a nice use where you see the same form being used, which is good. In Latin, it's very easy to rhyme in Latin because everything rhymes. Everything has the same endings. But it's clever here to use that same ending, but in totally different ways. Fallitur really is a deponent ending. Creditur is an impersonal. They work sort of fundamentally differently. But here they are rhyming, and it's very nice. Tuto, another good thing is enellage, or at least that's one way of using the word enellage. Tuto agrees grammatically with auditu, safe hearing. But really it's telling us more about creditor, there is a safe believing. And that's just called enellage. Again, it's clever. Not necessarily clever, it's just good Latin. It's just well constructed in that way. Credo, quid dixit, Dei filius. Again, going from creditur to credo, there is a believing. I believe. That's good tie-in from one line to the other. Credo quid dixit, Dei filius. Nil hoc veritatis verbo verius. A few notes on this. One, I've used a different word order in my prepared text than you heard in the recording. And actually, I think the most commonly sung version is Nil hoc verbo veritatis verius. And there's nothing wrong. It's not like grammatically anything changes. I like this wording, Nil hoc veritatis verbo verius. Just because you have that natural musical break lying in there. And this avoids splitting a word with that break. And, there are manuscripts that have it in this word order. I'm not just making something up. But I certainly hear more commonly the nil hoc verbo veritatis verius. I like the nil hoc veritatis verbo verius myself more, but that's neither here nor there. Good to note, oak, going with verbo, and verius. Verius is a, comparative adjective, comparative neuter adjective, going with nil. Verius, more true. And then verbo is your ablative of comparison, more true than the verbo veritatis. Again, it's good to see filius, verius, totally different meanings of those two endings, but rhyming them, and that's good rhyme in Latin. We're going to see plenty of sort of, what I would call trivial rhyme, where, of course, they rhyme. They are both nouns of the same declension in the same case. Here, that eus ending, totally different meanings. One's a comparative adjective and one's a nominative noun, but being used here very, very, very cleverly. It's also nice to see verbo here. Nothing is truer than this word. In one sense, it's just verbo, the word, according to John, Christ. But also, this word. Well, if you're seeing this at Mass, at communion, which is very common, what are the words that just happened? That's the words of consecration. This is my body, this is my blood. And it's good to see, you're grabbing both of those. He's punning on that very well. It's worth noting the alliteration. It's also worth noting Thomas Aquinas, the great teacher of the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. What a beautiful job in just this passage. Visus tactus gustus in te fallitur, sed auditus solo tuto creditor. Credo quid dixit de filius nil hoc veritatis verbo verius. That basically sums up the doctrine of transubstantiation. It also doesn't sound like a textbook. It's very good. It's a very beautiful way of teaching, and it really, welcome to the best, in a sense, the best way to use hymns is to use hymns that are both wildly beautiful and they draw the person up into the heavenly mysteries, but also they teach, they're not wrong, they're not doctrinally, lacking in any way. And in fact, they're teaching, the truths of the faith, the ones that are most important, most salient at any given moment. Moving on, let's look at verse 3. Okay, verse 3 here. In cruce latebat sola deitas. There's a lot of this use of the word late, latebat, latitas, latens. A lot of that here. Hidden, covered. Very central to Thomas's way of viewing the Eucharist and things like that. It's the veiling that then apocalypsis in Greek, the apocalypse, the revelation, is when all of this is going forward to that moment, the second coming, the full revelation of everything. The Eucharist is God himself, but also pointing towards this other coming of the same person who is in the Eucharist. So, in cruce latebat sola deitas, and that's, in cruce, of course, we're going back to the Passion, latebat sola deitas, meaning, what was hidden on the cross? Just the divinity. The humanity of Christ was in a sense, full view, and this goes back to the Fathers. In Greek, the language that the New Testament, the early church is working in, you have gods and not gods, and that's sort of one of the big, that's the big separation of the world. You have those who don't die and those who do die, and that's the big difference. And so when God comes down to prove his humanity, he has to do the thing that makes humans not gods. He dies. And in order to prove his divinity, he has to do the thing that gods do that humans don't. He has to live forever. And so you have the resurrection and then ascension to heaven and sort of remaining there forever. And it's nice to see, here's the culmination. Nice is probably, I mean, not such a lame word for this, but in the culmination of the incarnation of the God and man coming together, that culminates in the passion and resurrection, because that's when both are proven. One by he proves he's human by dying, he proves he's God by living forever. And that's why, with the fathers, the Deus fit homo et homo fiat Deus, God became man so that man might become God. God became and God died so that humans may live forever, so that humans could become God, be united to him in that way. And so all of that is sort of brought up in this line. In cruce latebat sola deitas, at eek, remember this is taking place in either Eucharistic adoration or Mass. So eek here probably best understood, at Mass in a sense. Eek because of the imagery that the Roman Catholic Church is very, very, again, fond. It just seems like such a lame word for this moment, but they call it the sacrifice of the Mass. They call it, they identify what happens at the Mass is what's happening at Calvary. They are one and the same event, represented, happening again, sort of remembered. And so, eek latet simul, here in the same place, or here at the same time, we're sort of melding the two together, latet et humanitas. So not only is the divinity latebat then, the humanitas latet now. And that's what's going on in those two lines there. Ambo tamen credens atque confidens. So both doing this and doing this. Peto, first person singular, peto, quod petivit latro penitens. I peto what he petivited. And the latro penitens, the penitent thief, Dismas, often called the good thief in English. And so here we've got, if we describe the first paragraph as sort of setting everything up, the second paragraph is describing basically the doctrine of transubstantiation. The third paragraph is describing more or less the identity between Calvary and the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. And let's, with that, move on to stanza 4. All right, so we've moved from setup, transubstantiation, Calvary, and here we bring up Thomas. Now it's interesting. Of course, who wrote this? Thomas Aquinas. And he's going to compare himself to Thomas the Apostle. Beautifully done. Plagas. Plagas means wounds. Here it means the 5 wounds of Christ. 1 in each hand, 1 in each foot, and 1 in the side. So plagas sicut Thomas non intueor. So there's that famous scene after the resurrection where the apostles see Christ, and he comes, and Thomas shows up later and says, I will not believe it until I see the wounds and put my hand in the side. Here, Aquinas is saying, non intueor, I do not perceive plagas. I don't perceive the wounds. Sicut Thomas. The way that Thomas did, I don't do that. If you ever see the Eucharist, there's not 5 wounds in the what looks like bread. Deum tamen, however, deum meum te confiteor. So we get, Thomas confesses, you are, oh my God, after he touches the wounds. Aquinas here is saying, I don't touch wounds, but still, however, I do confess the same thing that Thomas confessed. And then Christ, right after Thomas confesses it, says, you you touched my wounds, and so you believe. Blessed are those who do not see and yet believe. So Thomas is, in a sense, invoking that greater blessing that Christ promised to the Apostle Thomas, sort of promised to the rest of Christianity through the Apostle Thomas. Fac me tibi semper magis credere. Sorry, little classical pronunciation slipped through. Fac me tibi semper magis credere, in te spem abere, te diligere. Again, we got ascendatum. Credere, abere, diligere. 3 verbs that he wants, that he's asking God in the Eucharist to allow him to do. So, fac me credere. So, to facere, an accusative to infinitive, means to allow someone to do something. So, fac me credere, allow me to credere. You can credere the dative, tibi credere, no problems there. In te spem abere te diligere. So, in a sense, just 3 levels of verbs, but he's tied these in credere, spem abere, diligere, to believe, to hope, and to love. Well, there's your 3 theological virtues: to faith, hope, charity. And so in this way, he's setting up, actually, in a sense, the order in which those theological virtues are often granted, or at least the mental ordering of them. The first is faith, trust, trust and trustworthiness. Then hope, the ability to, what's the best way to describe hope? Not just, wishing good things, but hope is expecting what was promised. And then diligere, to love, to give fully of oneself to the other. And so, in this sense, now we get to paragraph 4, which is all about the 3 theological virtues, the grace that's given by God through the Eucharist and things like that. So, on to paragraph 5. All right, O memoriale mortis Domini. So, O memorial, important to notice memorial. What this word means theologically in Christianity is not just a memory, the way that we think of memory is just a recalling of an image in a mind, but a memoriale, or think of the good thief when he says, remember me, O Lord. What he's asking, and what's being asked here, what's being observed here, is a remembering is to make really present now a past reality. And so when the good thief asks Christ, remember me, O Lord, he's not just saying, think of me. He's saying, make real there what's happening now. I'm asking for mercy now. Can you make that mercy efficacious in your kingdom? Basically, can I go to heaven? Whereas here, O memoriale mortis Domini, it's a memorial of the death of the Lord. But it's also that which makes present now the same reality. So this is going back to the identification between the holy sacrifice, the Mass, and the Passion, and the crucifixion and death and resurrection. Also, fun to note, I was just thinking about this the other day, or at least I saw someone question, mortis Domini, stacking genitives like that. It happens. I've never seen it with more than 2. Here's 2. O memoriale mortis Domini. Domini modifies mortis, mortis modifies memoriale. I've never seen more than 2 in a row, but for whatever reason, that's just my brain latched onto that because I was just thinking about this the other day. Panis vivus, living bread, vitam prestans homini. Good to see. Vivus, vitam, juxtaposed together like that. That's just good writing. It's also good to see domini, omini, again, totally different grammatical forms, but rhyming here. A non-trivial rhyme, as I say. We saw earlier, like deitas, humanitas, confitens, penitens, trivial rhymes. Of course they rhyme, they're the same form. Domini, omini, we have a genitive and a dative. And not only do they rhyme, they are literally spelled and sound the exact same, except for one has a d sound at the beginning. Presta mea menti de te vivere. So prestans, you give to this guy something, give to this also vivere. So you can give an accusative noun or you can give an infinitive to allow or to cause something to do something. Dete probably here means according to your ways, according to you, in accordance with you, in your name, something like that. Secundum te would probably be much more sort of natural prose Latin. Of course, that wouldn't have fit here, and dete is fine. Et te illi sempertuce sapere. Illi, here I think best understood as pointing back to omini, also a dative. So presta here and presta illi sapere dulce te. So te, sapere. Sapere is interesting though. Sapere, worth bringing up. Sapere means to taste. It also later in Latin comes to mean to know. That's where like Spanish saber and French like savoir and things like that come from. It means to taste, but it also means to know. And it's interesting to note. Now maybe I'll just read the note that I made. Think of the biblical sense of to know. You know, Adam knew his wife and she conceived a son. It doesn't just mean to have knowledge of, it means to be intimate with. Which is why the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was such a big deal, because Adam and Eve had knowledge, intimacy with good already. They'd been created by God. By eating the fruit, that tacked on knowledge of evil, intimacy with evil. That's why it was, it's not that God desired Adam and Eve to stay ignorant of all things. It's this, he desired them not to have intimacy with evil because that corrupts and it kills. Here, think of Christ's title of bridegroom and the church, the title of bride, intimacy, in the way that to know means in the Old Testament. Receiving the Eucharist, one walks down an aisle, one, a member of the church, walks down the aisle toward the bridegroom, and you've got that the two shall become one flesh mentality, and the faithful receive the Eucharist, which is to say the bridegroom enters the body of the bride, and the two become one flesh. It's what is called deification in the West, theosis in the East. This union of God and man, the true union of man to God. And this is why, in a sense, the church defends her understanding of marriage so strongly. She sees it as a symbol of the union of God and man, which is to say the whole point of existence, according to Christianity, is that God became man so that man might become God. That there is this ability to be totally perfected. And it happens through this wedding, this union between God and man that is realized in the Eucharist, just in the same way that a marriage is realized in the union of the two into one flesh through what's called, the marital act. And so this is why the church defends both the understanding of theosis, but also the understanding of marriage so sort of almost might seem obsessive in some ways. It's because it's a symbol, it's the most tangible way that the average person is seeing what the church views as the most, the absolute point of existence and things like that. Messing with one image messes with the other. So this one, for people who aren't really sure why the Roman Catholic Church is so interested in marriage so much, it's because her whole understanding of the point of humanity as union with God is symbolized most strongly by this, and messing with one messes with the other, and the church does not desire people to not know what she considers the point of existence. So you can understand why they're sort of so again, I'm going to use the word obsessive. It obviously, if you believe the same thing as them, why would you not be obsessive about it? It would make no sense. Sort of like if you don't understand that oxygen is necessary, you would consider humans obsessed with breathing. But you can see why the church would have that mindset in that way. Moving on to 6. Right. Pie Pellicane, Jesu Domine. One of the most famous sort of medieval images of Christ is as a pelican. This comes from an ancient legend about pelicans that in time, if there's not food available, how does a mother pelican feed her children so that they don't starve? They believe that a pelican would, pick little pieces of its own body off and feed that to its children. So it would sacrifice itself, its own flesh, to feed its children so that they might live. This is, of course, not true about pelicans, but you can see how it's an obvious image of Christ in that way, especially in the Eucharist. This giving of his own flesh, feeding it to the children of God so that they might live forever. If that's what you know pelicans to do, how could you not have made that connection with Christ? I love the fact that pious, P-A, is used to describe Christ. Pious, of course, means loyal, trustworthy. And I just love the imagery of calling Jesus loyal, from a human perspective, to refer to, to hold, on the one hand, a very firm belief that God is not required to do anything for humans. Like, he's not under any obligation in that way. But also, to one of his most common titles throughout the Middle Ages is Pie, O pious Jesu, Pie Jesu Domine, O loyal, trustworthy one. It's worth thinking about. It's worth, if you want to know the medieval mind. That's an image that's one of the top 10 images, I think, is this Pie Jesu Domine. The references to Christ as the loyal one, the trustworthy one, things like that. Me in mundum munda tuo sanguine. One of my favorite puns is about to show up, but in mundum munda, wash the unwashed, clean the unclean. Me, tuo sanguine, cuius, if you're referring to the sanguine, of which una stilla, one little drop, salvum facere, is able to facere, salvum. Totum mundum, quid ab omniscelere. And so here's again that, it's, you're just going through the line. There's no et here, but one drop is able to do this, and it can do this. Quid, it is able. Ab omniscelere and facere, salvum. Quid, interesting verb here. It comes from queo, which is a back formation from nequeo. Nequeo means to not be able to. It's from nequeo. And then queo is just nequeo without the ne. So queo, quis, quit, etc. means to be able to. So potest, it's a direct 100% synonym with potest. It's also great pun, mundum, world. Munda, to clean, immundus, meaning to be unclean, things like that. That's a good pun to work with. That also helps with things. Domine sanguine, vocative and ablative. I don't know if it's not particularly untrivial, but I suppose if I made a big deal of Domini omni, I should make one out of Domine sanguine, something like that. Facere scelere, that's absolutely trivial. They are the exact same form. So let's look at paragraph 7. All right. So, Jesu, vocative. Jesu, quem velatum nunc aspicio. This nunc, of course, referring to the now, which is either in Mass or Eucharistic adoration. Velatum, veiled. You can see the English word through that. Again, going with this, the whole. Oh gosh, why am I so bad at explaining things all of a sudden? Or not all of a sudden, but just always and in general. The hiddenness. That is the Eucharist and things like that. Oro, I ask, fiat. So I ask that a subjunctive. So I ask that fiat illud quod tam sitio. Sitio, just a beautiful verb here. Look it up in your dictionary. But notice it's coming in the same position as sanguine came in the last paragraph. Worth noting. And then the illud quod tam sitio is this ut. Ut te revelata cedens facie. So revelata facie. Under a revealed appearance. So again, that looking forward to the apocalypsos. Cedens te visu tue gloriae. Visu tue gloriae. Sim beatus. Here's again that subjunctive of purpose, desire. This visu tue gloriae, that's what's called the beatific vision, worth Googling. I'm not going to describe everything about it, but basically it's Thomas's term to describe the experience of heaven. Worth Googling if you're interested in Roman Catholic theology and things like that. So, yeah, again, I guess we can go back. 5 is all about this memorial of death and life. The sort of in the Eastern churches they have the Paschal Troparion, which has the very famous line, "By death he trampled death." That's sort of what this 5th paragraph is like. 6 is the feeding of oneself imagery, and a lot of sort of the blood imagery, things like that. And then 7 is this vision, aspicio, visu gloriae, sort of in the early church, baptism was called illumination in a lot of areas of the church, and so there was this idea of knowledge, vision, seeing, things like that. And again, knowledge, of course, meaning intimacy and union. And so light imagery and vision imagery and things like that are very, very common throughout all of the centuries of Christianity. So hopefully that helped you get through this. This was longer than I thought it was going to be, this video, but all good things. So enjoy. I'll have links, a link in the description to the YouTube video that I got the sound from. It's from the Schola Gregoriana Mediolanensis. Beautiful version. And I won't drag this video out anymore. It's already very long, so hopefully that gave you a good appreciation of the Adoro Te Devote, and we'll see you later.